Hello, it's Mark here from Yokel Bear Reads. It's been a while. I've just really been busy at work and I've been working away quite a bit as well, and I just haven't really had the time to sit down and record anything. But here I am, I found the time. And this video is going to be some recommendations for reading for Halloween, because it's that time of the year, isn't it? And it's my favourite time of the year. I love autumn. I love the run up to Halloween where the nights are drawing in. It's a little bit darker. The leaves are decaying and falling off the trees. And I get to just feel a little bit more gothic. That's often reflected in my reading material. This is the time of the year that I really start to pick up some of the darker gothic stuff that I've got on my shelves, stuff about monsters, stuff about ghosts. 'Tis the season, basically. So I thought I would do some recommendations. I'm going to recommend 6 books today, and it's going to be split between fiction and non-fiction. I'm going to recommend 3 fiction books and 3 non-fiction books, all of which around the theme of Halloween, monsters, and just creepy stuff. So, anyway, the first recommendation, and this is one of my favourite collections of short stories ever, which is John Mandarino's But You Scared Me the Most. And not only do I love this because of the writing, because of the stories, but I love this because of the cover. Look at that cover. Have you ever seen anything more creepy? Absolutely love this. Now, as a collection of short stories, it's a little bit hit and miss sometimes. I don't love every single story in this collection. Some of them feel a little bit forced. Some of them have got rather unsatisfactory endings. But what makes this a recommendation is the ones that are good, because the ones that are good are absolutely brilliant. Can highly recommend the story called Nessie, about 2 sisters and their obsession with the song Puff the Magic Dragon. We've also got the story The Wolfman and Janice, which puts a kind of human face on somebody being a werewolf. It's about a werewolf who's just trying to get through his life with his wife, keep his head down, and just finding it really difficult, especially considering that he keeps eating the neighbour's dog. And so, he's having a bit of a rough time of it. There's a very bizarre but really brilliant story about a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, being sexually frustrated because he's the only one around. But if you really, really want to know the story that I think makes this collection, it's a story called Bob and Todd. And it's about a hitchhiker who gets picked up by somebody whilst he's hitchhiking. And I'm not going to give too much away, apart from saying that it's kind of a hitchhike story that goes wrong, or the hitchhiking goes wrong, that the driver may or may not have a corpse in the boot of the car. But the only way that I can really describe this is that it is the most, the tension all the way through. You'll be squirming all the way through this story because something's not right. So yeah, I really, really love this collection. So if you can get hold of it, do so, because it's really good. This is a story not just about kind of Halloween monsters. There's stuff in there that's references to Frankenstein and Dracula, but it really takes that material and creates something new out of it. These are stories of bad people being bad, monstrous being monstrous, but also humans being monsters and monsters being human. And I think that's really satisfying. So yeah, highly recommend this one. The next book I'm going to recommend comes from, it's been published by the British Library. And I will say the British Library are publishing some fantastic collections of short stories, especially if you like kind of ghost stories, weird fiction. They've been publishing loads, going into their archives and publishing stuff that has not been available for a while, or you have to really search around for. So my next recommendation is Lost in a Pyramid, and other classic mummy stories. And the reason I picked this is, one, I absolutely love the whole kind of, as a monster, the mummy. I was brought up on the Universal films and the Hammer films about mummies coming back to life. I'm also really interested in Egyptology, and I think these stories are interesting on two levels. First of all, they're scary. There's something quite scary about things coming back to life. And I think there's been a lot of stuff done over the years, especially at the moment. Everything's dominated by vampires and zombies. And I think I've said before in one of my videos, I'm not a big fan of zombies. They're kind of not very elegant as monsters. Whereas I think mummies are a little bit more elegant. You know, they look a bit kind of rough with the bandages and what have you. But there's something almost romantic about mummies, about that coming back to life and coming back for either kind of revenge or love or something like that. Now, this is a collection of stories that was written at what I guess you could say was the heyday of the mummy stories between 1869 and 1910. And there was a real spate to them. But also as well, I think the other level that you can read these on, a lot of these stories are about revenge from beyond the grave because of things that are being disturbed or things that are being taken. Tombs being raided by archaeologists, tombs, artefacts being taken from Egyptian tombs. And I think very much this was written at a time when, you know, at the height of the British Empire, and it wasn't just Britain, but, you know, other countries were plundering the world for archaeological things. But I think the British Empire was particularly known for it. Look at the Elgin marbles that are still in the British Museum. And I think often horror reflects concerns at the time or reflects things that are being felt in society. And I think this whole idea, and this is where the whole thing of, you know, the mummy's curse, Tutankhamun's curse, I think they're written from a position of actually taking all this stuff is probably not right. It's probably not morally right. And to take it from the countries like Egypt and away from the people that live there. And I think a lot of these stories were written out of that kind of, well, you know, maybe there's some payback for this. Maybe there is some, you know, this is wrong and something there'll be some karma involved. And I think a lot of these stories come from that. There is a book, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the book's called, but somebody in about 4 years ago wrote a really good non-fiction book about the cultural significance of the whole myth of the mummy's curse. If I find it, I'll put it in the link down below because it's worth a read, because it goes into a kind of how the whole idea of the mummy's curse was really about empire and colonialism and stuff like that. But going back to the original level, these can be read just as really entertaining, scary stories. Two that I would highly recommend is, first of all, there's one in here by Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote ghost stories and horror stories as well as Sherlock Holmes. His story, Lot Number 249, is, I think, an absolute classic. But also, check out W.G. Pearson's The Necklace of Dreams. And again, these are not necessarily about mummies. These are about kind of Egyptian revenge and stuff like that. But they're really scary as well, and I really, really enjoy reading these. The last fiction review that I'm doing, recommendation, is one that I've literally just finished reading. I think it was published last week, which is Dracul by Dacre Stoker and J.D. Barker. Now, I'm not a big fan sometimes about, like the Poirot novels and the Sherlock Holmes novels where they've got modern day authors to go back and kind of write new versions. I think Sophie Hannah's doing Poirot, Anthony Horowitz has been writing new James Bond stuff. And initially I thought, well, maybe this is kind of the same. But I think there's two differences here. One of which is, one of the writers is Dacre Stoker, who is Bram Stoker's great grandnephew. So there's a relation. He's been very involved in kind of Bram Stoker's estate and stuff like that. And they've got J.D. Barker, who's a great writer, who's, obviously done quite a lot of the writing for this. But the reason why I think it's different for the stuff that Sophie Hannah's doing and Anthony Horowitz and whatever is that this is actually based on notes and drafts that Bram Stoker left behind. And in effect, it works as a prequel to Dracula, but not quite, because Bram Stoker himself is a character in the book. So it breaks the, I don't know what you call it, the fourth wall of the author. The author of the original book is somehow involved in the prequel. And it's great. I mean, I'm not going to give too much of the plot away because, like I said, it is kind of a prequel, but don't expect it to be just the run-up to what happens in Dracula. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But yeah, this is a great read. I really raced through it, and I think I can highly recommend this. Also, I love the inside cover. Look at that. There's Dracula at a window, Dracula floating in midair. It's a little bit creepy, isn't it? So yeah, I'm a big fan of Bram Stoker. I'm a big fan of Dracula. I think there's been some terrible stuff written around Dracula, stuff that's brought up to date. In that, I don't include Kim Newman's Anno Dracula series, which I think is absolutely great, but there's been some terrible kind of follow-ups to Dracula written. Well, this is a prequel, and it's pretty good, so I can highly recommend this. So, on to the non-fiction. Well, where would we be for Halloween without witches? But this is the non-fiction section of this video, and I'm going to recommend The Witches, Salem, 1692, A History by Stacy Schiff. This reads like a thriller. This is the story of what actually happened in Salem with the witch trials. What you're not going to get in here is, they were really witches and stuff like that. This is about the social history. This is about religious belief. This is about how a community could actually be, could be led down this road of witch trials and the paranoia. There's loads of stuff in here as well about a lot of detail. I mean, it says on the back that Schiff defines, she interrogates her sources, and she does this in a really critical way. She looks at all the sources for what is now kind of a true story that's been surrounded by myths and legends, and tries to get to the heart of what's the reality here. And I think she does it. It's a fascinating read. It's a fascinating piece of history, and it's Halloween, and it's about witches. So, it doesn't have to be about the horror stories. It can be about the history too, because, a lot of this stuff is historical. And also as well, interestingly, there's a big industry growing up around Salem. And I think this happens sometimes where often something that's really kind of problematic or terrible or whatever, as the myths and legends get attached to it, a kind of tourist industry grows up around it. And it's one of my dreams actually to spend Halloween in Salem one year to see what they do. So anyway, The Witches, Stacy Schiff, highly recommended. Now, it wouldn't be a Yoko Bear Reads video if we didn't mention ghosts and ghost stories, because I absolutely love them. As you know, have I mentioned that? I've probably mentioned it once or twice or 15 times. So, this is absolutely brilliant, and this is actually is published by the Tate Gallery in London. This is Susan Owens, The Ghost, a Cultural History. That's exactly what it is. It's kind of a history about how ghosts have been part of our culture for many, many years, and how they've, centuries, probably right back to the dawn of time. And it's about kind of how it's influenced culture, but also how culture has expressed belief in ghosts and fears about ghosts and fears about the afterlife. One thing I love about this, it goes into literature, so there's all stuff about why ghost stories and horror fiction, stuff like this, but there's also loads and loads of stuff about the depiction in art of ghost stories. And as you can imagine, being published by the Tate Gallery, There's just some incredible prints in here. There's just some incredible pieces of art that kind of talks you through about how the art depicting ghosts tells us a lot about the time that it was being written in, and some of these are absolutely beautiful. You know, there's stuff in here by William Blake and all kinds of people, and also about how kind of popular culture, like this one here would have been in a broadsheet, like an early runner of a tabloid newspaper, a forerunner of a tabloid newspaper. So yeah, it's a little bit pricey, this one, but it's worth it if you're really interested in ghost stories and kind of culture, but the spookier edge of culture. This is really good. So the final book I'm going to recommend, and I absolutely love this book. I love this book to death. Is the best kind of non-fiction book I've got about ghosts and vampires and stuff like that, which is Peter Law's The Frighteners, Why We Love Monsters, Ghosts, Death and Gore. So it's actually more than just about kind of vampires and ghosts. It's also about why we love crime and true crime and stuff like that, and why, you know, gory horror films and slasher films are really, really popular. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Peter Laws is an ordained priest, or as he describes himself, the sinister minister. But he's got a real interesting kind of, he's written some really dark crime novels that verge on horror, but he's also got this kind of, you know, he's an ordained priest as well, which makes for an interesting kind of tension in, you know, some of the stuff that he writes. This is essentially a bit of a travel book as well. This is about, each chapter is about him going somewhere. Like, for instance, it starts off with him going for a holiday in Transylvania. And that springboards into kind of a look at the vampire myth. But also in here, you've got stuff around ghosts, you've got stuff around zombies. There's lots and lots of stuff if you're a zombie fan. There's lots of stuff in here about zombies and Night of the Living Dead and Romero and stuff like that. As I said, I'm not a great zombie fan, but even I found this really, really fascinating. So yeah, this is something to read around about Halloween. And if you really enjoy Halloween, and if you're one of those people like me that's got the reputation for being a little bit on the dark side with their reading, a little bit morbid, this is great. So yeah, this will explain why you're like you are, and there's nothing wrong with that. So anyway, so that is my Halloween Gothic autumn evening drawing in recommendations for this year. I will be posting more videos. I have got a little bit of a Halloween haul to do as well. I'll be doing a review of a murder mystery that's more than a murder mystery, that's absolutely blown me off my feet. I'm not going to say more about that, but there's a book that's probably gone into the top 5 of what I've read this year, just because it's just so damn clever. So yes, so that's me done. Halloween's coming, get your pumpkins ready, get some scary reading done. That's all from me. Goodbye.